Welcome back to Economics with Dr. A. I am your host, Dr. Abdullah Abarani, Associate Dean and Associate Professor of Economics at the Hale College of Business. It's been a long time since we've revisited why did we start the Economics with Dr. A channel. It's been 4 years almost, and I thought it would be a great time for us to bring in some of the Econ with Dr. A team correspondents, if you may, that have been contributing to the content over the past 6 to 8 months. And frankly, it's been such a blessing having them be part of the team. They've engaged me and engaged the content so that we are figuring out who our audience is moving forward. So we've also hit 12,000 subscribers on YouTube. We have a lot of listeners on the podcast, so we thought it was a great time for us to stop, reintroduce who we are, and then also tell you the story of why Economics with Dr. A started, and then we will talk to you about what the future holds. Social media and content creation is going through a really difficult time right now. We're facing some of these challenges, and we'll share some of the challenges, but we also want to tell you how we're overcoming them. So today I have three of our Econ with Dr. A team members, Grace McCon, Fawaz Abdulaziz, and Antoine Batts. And without the three of these individuals, and we're missing Fred Small and Keisha Francisco, who are also instrumental, but unfortunately have to be in class. So we're going to talk to Grace, Fawaz, and Antoine, and they're going to ask me all the questions that they're dying to ask. Welcome to Econ with Dr. A, where we break down economics and business topics to empower your life. I'm Dr. A, your guide on this journey. Join me in explaining the insights that matter, helping you make informed decisions for a better personal and financial future. Let's get started. Thank you all for joining us. Grace, what's your question to get the day started?
All right, so I want to start back at the beginning, all the way COVID-19, when this channel was born, and kind of go through there, the evolution. So as we know, a lot of your YouTube channel was born actually from the COVID pandemic, and having to switch your content online, still figure out how to become an engaging educator during this online environment. So I just want to hear a little bit from your perspective. When did you decide that you were going to actually go through with making these videos? How did the switch go for you? I just want to hear your initial mindset when you decided, all right, I'm doing this thing, I'm making the YouTube.
Grace, great question. So to paint the picture, what happened, it was roughly June 2020, and I was in Oman, and I was there for the summer, but hopefully was planning on coming back. Flights were an issue, so I knew that I was going to teach online in August. And I don't know if you recall, but the sentiment around educators teaching online was negative. The perception was online teaching is bad. Faculty don't know how to engage students. And there was this one comment that kept on coming up. How are we supposed to compete for the attention of our students when there's YouTube, and at that time TikTok was picking up? So the narrative was economic educators or educators in general won't be able to retain the attention of students and won't be able to compete with social media. So with that in mind, I asked myself, why are we competing with social media? Why not be part of social media? If our students are going to YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, why not be part of that ecosystem? So what I did is I bought a camera and started shooting the content that I need to. And it was the toughest thing of my life because I was under the impression that I had to shoot everything in one take. So anytime made a mistake, I started all over again. Why? Because I didn't know about editing. So I learned how to edit. I learned how to tell stories, how to create animations, how to overlay music. There's so many mistakes I made, but I learned so much. And I think it's impacted my teaching today because I lead with why you need to listen to the last lecture. historically, when I was teaching in person, I had a captive audience for 60 to 75 minutes. So I did not feel the need to sell them on why they should hear me. And now I'm a better presenter because I recognize that people's attention is valuable and I need to fight for it. And I do that the entire time. So that's how we started the Econ with Dr. A. It's evolved since then, but the premise was, you say I can't teach online, bet. Let's
I
see.
like that. And it's actually really cool for me. Me and Becca Wilson, who was also a former fellow, because we were in the same macro class with Dr. A. And I just remember sitting, watching your videos and telling my mom, like, oh my gosh, this professor has a YouTube channel and he has all these videos. And to just see how it's evolved and now being involved with creating the content, it's just been like kind of a cool evolution to go through.
It's a full circle. And then there's another thing that I also forgot to mention of why I felt so inclined to create this content. The other piece of the story is everybody was saying that educators were just getting YouTube videos or content from somebody else and uploading it. They weren't actually teaching online. And there was this whole conversation about how we should cut teacher pay because they're just using videos. So, me being Abdullah Al Bahrani, I had a challenge because there's no videos out there that look like me. So it would be really obvious that I was using somebody else's content. So, in my desire to show effort and the fact that I'm actually doing work and the work is mine, I had to appear in video and I wanted to create that community that I have with my students in a video format. Mm, I doubt I was successful, but some of the comments that you and Becca have made about that time that you took the class tell me that I might have reached some students. So, in hopes of being a role model for another, Abdullah Bahrani or somebody else from, the other parts of the world, I thought that we need to have an economist that looks like me creating content on social media. All right, that's a great question. I'm gonna push it next to. Let's go to Antoine. Antoine, what's your question?
Actually, I was going to follow up more on what you had just said about having someone that looks like you, because that's something I always sort of liked about your content. I guess everyone should know I'm one of the few people on the team that's never had Dr. A as a teacher. We actually met through his content online with YouTube and interactions there and in other places also. And it's very interesting because I was looking for economists on YouTube that were not just pale Europeans, as it commonly is up there. And I
Yeah,
magically found him one day, and I've always thought it was very interesting about your content that you always been very inclusive about all cultures and all groups of people. And I want to know what is the driving factor behind that? As you were doing it long before it became more of a we should do this as a standard type of thing. And I think that I could tell that you knew about these problems and you saw the inequities long before. So, what made you decide to be more inclusive? And
I see it as just listening to people, right, and recognizing that people have different perspectives. You could coin the term however way you want, but the reality of it is economics is about personal choice and personal decision making and personal outcomes. And if we don't have a way to measure the variations on how different people are experiencing the economy differently, then we're missing the purpose of economics. We're missing policy. We're missing how to improve the lives of the people that we're supposed to serve. So my perspective is very different than Fawaz's perspective or your perspective, Antoine, and definitely very different than Grace's. So, we need to make sure that when we're designing policies and we're evaluating the impact of policies, to measure the different segments of the economy that might be impacted. Um, one thing that I like about our Hail Fellows community is we have an Instagram group chat where we share content with each other about things that we like and we see. And before this call, I just shared an Economist post with the team that showed the career impacts uh, of um, of parents by gender before they have a kid and after they have a child. And the disparities are striking. The way having a child impacts man is very different than how it impacts a woman. And we need to be conscious about that. And if policy is only driven by men or by women or one segment of the economy, then we're not being real to what economist or economics wants to do, and that's to improve the well-being of everybody. So that's my lens, and that's how I teach my classes. I want to hear different perspectives. That's what shapes my research. I, you know, I try to evaluate what, uh, areas where people have not examined and try to shed light on them. And Antoine, for people that obviously your camera's not on, Antoine's having a bit of technical issues with his video, but how would you identify racially, just so everybody knows the lens in which you ask that question?
Yeah. So personally, I'm an African American male, born and raised in Virginia.
Hmm. And one thing that I love about the relationship with Antoine, it's is exactly why I thought creating this online content is really important to build community at a time where community was lacking during the COVID-19 pandemic. We were all trapped at home, and we were finding ways to connect with people that either inspired us, uplifted us, engaged us mentally in ways that to deflect from the pain that we were all facing during that time. And I can't tell, I don't even remember the first day Antoine reached out, but what I can tell is the content on Econ with Dr. A has been heavily impacted by Antoine's present, his thoughts, his encouragement to create content. So this is exactly why I wanted to create the Econ with Dr. A community and through the many platforms, because we need more people to bring each other together to tackle real world problems. Thank you, Antoine. Fawaz,
Yeah.
you're up next.
So
What's your
my question
question?
is more like personal, because like for instance, as an international student, like I'm always looking for like community that gives me like a sense of belonging, and also this like what we create idea gives me a sense of belonging. And this, so like through the process of creating content, so how do you manage the imposter syndrome like when you started, and also like how do you
Yeah.
manage not to be burned out through the process?
Oh, really good questions. So one, not a question you asked, but something you mentioned, the sense of belonging. I think ultimately, deep down, the reason I'm creating this content is because I also want to belong. Um, and it's my vehicle in carving out a niche in a place where I feel like I can make an impact. As far as imposter syndrome, we'll start with that one. I remember the first video I uploaded. I thought the entire world was watching me. Like everybody would know that there's this economist that's uploading videos, and everybody would be watching me and critiquing every comment I made, every graph that I put together. So the pressure was super high at the beginning to make sure that there was nothing people could be critical of. And what I realized is it wasn't the economists that were critical. Social media is a place where people are just critical. So any mistake I made, somebody identified it before I even noticed. A misspelling on a slide, oh, they found it. And what I realized, and it actually helped me reduce the imposter syndrome in the other parts of my life, is there's always going to be somebody that's critiquing you, no matter what, right? Whether they have the right to critique you or not, there's somebody that has an opinion about what you're doing. And rather than focus on the people that have opinions about what I'm doing that I don't know, let me focus on the people that have opinions that are part of my team. So that's why I come to you, Grace, Antoine, Fred, and Keisha often and say, "Hey, what can we do to improve?" And that internally builds a culture of continuous improvement, growth mindset, but it also creates a cushion away from the outside world that has critiques, because we have our own lab that we're trying to grow things that we're trying to do together. So having the team environment has really helped me overcome the imposter syndrome. And I want to give a shout out to Mrs. A. She was the team before there was ever a team. In my first videos, she was the one holding the teleprompter so I could read the teleprompter. We always had ways to kind of reevaluate and figure out what we need to do next. But I would never continue to do this if I don't have a team. And I'm grateful for each one of you to be part of that kind of uplifting environment that we have. And your second question was about burnout, right? That's the other thing. And they go together, burnout and imposter syndrome. Without a team, this week, I probably would have skipped a video. And the reason that we're doing this is because I need to feel like I'm doing this work with somebody else. What they don't tell you, and there's a lot of economists now that are creating content, newsletters that are fantastic, like Monday Morning Economist by Jadron Wooten, Chris Clark with his TikToks. But I can imagine if most of them are like me, it feels super lonely. Content creation and writing and research is a lonely process. This goes also for academic research. And what I have found is I need a team. So if you look at all my publications, my academic publications, there's out of 26 papers, there's only 2 papers that are solo authored. Not because I can't write by myself, but because I prefer to be part of a team. And that helps me get through the burnout because you have the support system that's needed. Otherwise, this content creation would not be possible without a strong team that
Yeah, and
uplifts
also
you.
it helps with some ideation, like just yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the content from specifically January, and if you're a new listener here, I would encourage you to go listen to the podcast or the YouTube or read the newsletters. And what you will notice is the tone has changed. And the reason the tone has changed is because I'm leaning in to the topics that you all find interesting. And it's made me a better writer, a better presenter, because I'm listening to my audience. You are my target audience, right? I'm not creating this for economic professors or general public. I'm targeting the 18 to 24-year-olds that are trying to figure out life in the business and economics world. So the things that are interesting to you are therefore interesting to my audience, and now I'm able to see it from a different lens. So
Speaking about research, there is one thing I wanted to sort of highlight. You do a very good job with researching financial literacy and personal finances. I feel like that's one of the fields that's sort of like ignored in academia, not
mhm.
specifically because it's like it's not important and professors don't find it interesting, but it's not really something that would necessarily draw big acclaim or sort of a public um, like a public place in knowledge or something like that. So, but I always like the fact that you
Yeah.
focused on that as a part of your research and found it very sort of rewarding that you were getting information out there. But what was something that inspired you to actually like research personal finance and how it affects families and individuals on a whole level?
Really great question, Antoine. And you're right. This field is a relatively new field. People have been asking questions around personal finance, but the field had not developed. Anna Marie Lasardi, who's at Stanford right now, and Olivia Mitchell were kind of the first to formalize the field, and now it has its own JEL codes, which means it's officially a field. But historically, people have been asking these questions about how people make decisions about their personal finances. The reason that it did not catch on is it if you assume a rational individual, then these decisions that people are making are rational, and therefore they're personal choices. There's no undesirable outcomes. It became an area that people were interested in during the Great Recession, during the financial crisis, and that's actually what got me interested, because before I started my PhD program, I was actually doing selling mortgages, and during the housing boom and everything that these textbooks about rational decision making, markets being efficient, outcomes are going to be desirable, kind of crumbled in as I was going through life. These things didn't hold, and in what was it, August 2006, I went back to get my PhD because I wanted to understand how people make decisions around purchasing a house, because I didn't see any rationality. I didn't see the models that made economic theory simple to answer actually apply when it came to those decisions. And, the housing market today has its own idiosyncrasies, but that's what got me into that area. And I believe that the quote unquote American dream is live and well. The difference between people that are able to attain it and the people that cannot attain it is, one, lack of information on how to navigate the complex world and the information, which is why this channel exists, because I want to provide that information. And then two, when I talk about information, people think that I am ignoring the systemic issues that might be arising in our society. That's not the case, because there are two main reasons that I think people are not attaining the American dream of financial freedom: lack of information, and then there's some things about our system that need to be reevaluated. Access to banking is a good example of that. Policies that impact, well-being can all impact our financial decision making. But that's the catalyst behind my research and trying to understand how to improve the financial well-being of individuals, because if they are better off, then they're happier. And ultimately, I just want people to be happy.
Yeah, and then kind of going off, I think that's a good segue. You talked about kind of the purpose of your content a little bit being to make people happy. So I want to talk about kind of some of the shifts that have happened with your platforms recently. So I know that the premise of Econ with Dr. A has always been to explain economic concepts in a way that's digestible, very easy for the common person to understand. But as you've
Mhm.
kind of said earlier, we've been exploring a few more interesting topics as of recently. I know I wrote an article on Stanley and Bucky's, so I've thrown some very out there ideas that are more just off of my curiosity of what kind of trends or things can we turn into economics. So I just wanted to hear from you a little bit about some of the changes that have been happening with the platforms and kind of ideation for the platforms, and where you think the social media direction is heading in the future.
Yeah. In short, I don't know where it's going, but I know we're having fun. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like we're enjoying the process rather than just trying to get a video out every week. What are we going to talk about? Now we're kind of ideating and asking, what are the things that we're curious about, and chasing, trying to understand or explain it from economic or business perspective. And that has allowed us to create different newsletters, different YouTube videos, and most importantly, different podcasts. I'm really excited about the Valentine's Day podcast that's going to come out. And it's something that I've in the past usually thought about. And it's a conversation that we have in our household, how we should not celebrate Valentine's Day, uh, but celebrate February 15th. But I've never put it in paper. And you all have allowed me to be able to find new ways of asking or presenting the questions and the thoughts that we have. So the future of it is we're going to lean more towards the things that make us curious and the things that we want to be able to explain for us. and hopefully other people would be um, excited about that too. One comment that I've gotten in the past is sometimes when I'm explaining concepts, it feels like I'm talking at people, not talking with people. And it's because I think I felt like I needed to explain something as if I'm the expert. And now I want to take on this role of explaining things that I have learned. And hopefully this brings us in together. But what's your
Yeah.
question?
So I know you mentioned podcasts. So like I want to know, I know the reason, but how
Mhm.
did you create a podcast? Like when did you come up with the idea like you're gonna have a podcast?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of podcasts. In fact, I love podcasts more than I love video content. So I've always wanted to start a podcast. I never thought I could, but you, Fawaz, and Becca, and James were in my office. I think it was in November,
Yeah,
and
I
you're
think
like, "Why don't we start a podcast?" And I tried to resist. I'm like, "Oh, it's another platform, another thing." But honestly, I love it. I love creating the podcasts more than the YouTube videos. It feels like there's more artistic expression
yeah, yeah,
in the audio format than there is in the video format. The fight to get attention on YouTube kind of forces you to be clickbaity, to just be over the top in the editing, whereas the podcast feels more like you're having a conversation like we are right now.
yeah.
So I want to lean more towards that. What are your thoughts on the podcast?
Oh, I'm more of a YouTube person, like
Okay.
because normally like I have a YouTube channel, but I think the podcast it's more easier, like it's more easier to create and you feel it's more like expressive. Like you could talk
Mhm.
about anything on podcast. Like it's based on what you feel.
Yeah.
And that's the main reason why I like creating why I like the podcast more.
So Grace, I saw that you dropped off for a bit. We were talking about the difference between the content of YouTube versus podcast. Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the podcast content or the YouTube content?
Oh, I am definitely a podcast person, I'd have to say. And this is something we were talking about the other day, actually. And for me, don't I don't ever pull up a YouTube video because I find that the time that a YouTube video normally spans is so awkward for me. A podcast, I can put it on, they're 30 to 40 minutes, so I can clean my bathroom or do some laundry while I'm listening. I can still be productive. And even when I'm sitting at a desk working, I can still have a podcast on and do all my work. And then when I'm bored and just want to scroll through something, that's when I'll scroll through Instagram reels. But YouTube videos, I just find that at the 10-minute mark, they're kind of an awkward time. And with podcasts, I also really like that just natural flow of conversation. I like to feel like I'm in the room with people just chatting and having a good time. Whereas YouTube videos definitely feel more manufactured to me. And that's just something I feel has changed in the market recently. Like people used to love those high quality, like really nicely edited videos. Whereas now I feel like they appreciate just casual podcast content that takes half the time to set up and record a lot more so.
Yeah, and I feel like I enjoy it better because I can actually articulate my thoughts, take pauses, whereas on the, this high retention editing YouTube content, it feels like you're just under pressure to throw in sound effects, music, just to keep people watching. I'm like, if I'm fighting so much for you to watch my content, is what are the returns? What are you giving back to me? And we started this conversation talking about the importance of community, and I feel like the podcast and the newsletter feel more community based than YouTube. I don't want to get rid of YouTube, but over the next year, I think we're going to rely a little bit more on and have podcasts and newsletters be our kind of main thing, and YouTube be our advertising channel, our marketing channel for the content. What would you like to see happen over the next Grace, you're a fellow until May when you graduate. What would you like to see content wise?
For me, So I kind of gravitate towards topics that are more just sparking people's curiosity. I think that's something that all the fellows have in common is I know Fawaz, like he's definitely more into like the macro side of economics. He likes talking about inflation and unemployment in the jobs report, whereas that's not as much what I like to talk about. I like more micro topics. I'm also a marketing major as well as economics, so finding interesting trends in the market, trying to explain those. But at the end of the day, we're all curious about something and we all geek out about our different things. So I'd like to see content that just focuses on that, like need to answer a question no matter the question. So more of that curiosity route as opposed to strictly economics. That's kind of what I'd like to see. And in a podcast form. I love the podcast.
Perfect. Fawaz, what do you like to see?
Um, so what I would like to say is more of like international like news, like bit like Asha said, I like the macro stuff. So more of like
Wait, sorry. I got to cut you off. You're talking about international, and I have to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for Nigeria's loss yesterday. I was watching the score on my on Google
yeah,
throughout the day, and I saw the first goal by Nigeria. I was like, oh, they got this, and then the two scores in the second half by
yeah, it's
uh,
it's life. You you
it's life.
you
It
win some, you
happens.
lose some. It's like you grow
Just
from
know
it.
that I was thinking about you yesterday, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, you grow from
But
it.
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so like I would like more of the like international news, like what's happening in like maybe I'm from Nigeria, like so what's happening in Nigeria, inflation in Nigeria, or like more of China, Argentina, just bringing out the news from outside United
Yeah.
States. I think that's gonna help because that's where I see my lens going to. So I want to see more of that also.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I think having international, I think 40% of our readers or watchers are from outside of the United States. 70% of them are between the ages of 18 and 24. So we need to find topics that resonate with that age group internationally. I just turned 43 this year or 2 weeks ago. So what I find interesting might not resonate with what my audience finds interesting. That's where your value comes into play here is educating me on what is it in your lens that matters to you and your colleagues. Um, let me, I'll take the interviewer seat for a second. What is the benefit to you of being on this Econ with Dr. A team?
I'll start off with my story. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I know like I started the Econ with Dr. content last fall around August after my like my during my research. So and that was when I created a content called Inflation Rates in Nigeria. And
Yeah.
that's on your platform. I think it's I think it's helped me. What was the question again? I was kind of
What's the value of you being on this
yeah.
team?
So
What do you like
like
about it?
during the process, like me creating the content by myself, I think I've learned more on the editing side, like the
Mhm.
how to like bring in the animations, b-rolls on the YouTube channel, because I have my YouTube channels also. So I think that really helps.
Shout out to your YouTube channel. We'll make sure to link to it in the description.
Yeah, so I think it's helped. I think it has helped me also, and also like this um spring semester, we've gone on like we kind of revamped everything. Like we are doing the writing right now, and right now
Mm,
I've written like two articles, one inflation rates in Nigeria and Argentina, and also the birth of Econ with Dr. A. So
yeah.
I think it's helped me in the editing, and also it has helped me like being a good writer. Like it's helped me like having a curiosity about things, like what's happening outside that I can write about, and everyone can see what's happening outside.
Thank you. Grace, what's the value to Grace McCon?
Yeah, there's been a lot of things. I'll echo that seeing kind of the behind the scenes of how content created is created and all the thought that has to go behind it and the editing. That's been really interesting to see, kind of that behind the scenes. Um, and just something simple I didn't think about was like how you go about repurposing content, because we always try to kind of align our channels. Okay, if we're doing a newsletter, should we make a podcast about this? And just like figuring out how to work smarter, not harder. Like, it really is a strategy when you talk about a content strategy. But I'll agree with Fawaz. I've liked kind of the ideation process, like brainstorming new newsletters. That's been really fun to me because I love to write. And then also with Dr. A's podcast, The Fellows, we actually started our own podcast. So that's been really cool to just be able to set the equipment up on a Thursday after our Hail Emerging Leaders Club. We just set it up and we get to filming, or recording. I always say filming for a podcast, but we just get to recording. And so that's been really cool to kind of have our own little side project inspired from what we've learned from Econ with Dr. A. So that's been a few takeaways for me.
Yeah, and what's the name of the podcast?
Unscripted with the Fellows.
Unscripted with the Fellows.
Yeah, I love that you all started the Unscripted with the Fellows podcast, because it's a testament, an outcome of what you're learning throughout this process. Like, you all started a podcast on really the first week that you're all working together. The quality each episode gets better and better. And I think because now you are creating your own content, you also understand the importance of the work that we do. You're not just somebody writing. Now you're creating community, and you understand the impact of that.
Yeah. For me, the goal is never to like have our podcast go viral. I've just really valued that little community of, I don't know, it might be 10 people that come up and are like, "Oh, I watch or I listened to your podcast and I liked it." So that's something really cool, and something I've also learned is just like the value of community, because we have our YouTube premieres and it might be 12 people on, but I know Dr. A's mom is always going to be there and she's always going to be
Yeah.
supporting, and we see familiar faces. So that's just really fun that we have a kind of crowd that rallies around what we're doing, and that's rewarding in itself.
Thank you both for being part of it. One area or challenge that we're facing right now is the name of the content. Econ with Dr. A. The people that are closest to me, my family members, want me to keep the Econ with Dr. A. They see it as a personal brand, but it's grown beyond a personal brand. And we have to start thinking about rebranding it. And I don't know what we rebrand it to, but I think for it to continue to sustain and grow, a rebrand is necessary. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I personally think it's a good idea. I think it'd be a good move for your platforms, just because I feel like recently we definitely have been shifting less toward of that strict economics focus, and it's more just now about curiosity or like wanting to learn more about a topic in general. And then I think with the rebrand, with it being more of a community brand, there's more opportunity to do what we're doing now. Like, if Fawaz writes a newsletter, he can kind of take ownership for that one, or if I do that, I can do the same. So I think it will definitely, by rebranding, it will open the scope of what we can write about without being off brand, and then it will also just help more people talk about what they
Yeah,
geek out about, which I think will be good.
Yeah,
thank
yeah, and also like it's all like what you said, ownership. So like when it's more general, it's not like Econ with Doctor. It's we could take more ownership on it. Like we could repurpose
yeah,
it like on our platform, maybe Instagram or LinkedIn or something like that. So like I think I like the idea. It gives
okay,
ownership, and also it gives us our voice. We could like we have our voice right now, but it's everyone knows everyone, like they don't really know if this is Grace or like, but if it's more
yeah,
general, they will know. They could know if this is Grace Fowers or Frederick or Keisha.
yeah, yeah. Right now, the ownership is owned by me, and that's not necessarily true, because it's a team environment and it's not being reflected in the name. The $1 million question is, what should it be rebranded to? So if you're listening to this and you have ideas, what should we rename Econ with Dr. A to? Um, Something that has come up often is curiosity, teaching me something, learning something together. These are the themes that are resonating. But I don't know what you are the audience. So tell us what your thoughts are. And if we end up picking up the name that you provide, then maybe we'll have you on the show to tell us a little bit more about why you picked that name and what you like about this content and how you can contribute. This is a community event. It would not be possible without each one of you. And I want to make sure that the content moving forward both reflects the fact that we are a community, but two, also engages our community in the development of the content. Um, Fawaz, Grace, any other questions that you all have?
So I have a question.
Sure.
It's more of like a reflection. So throughout this process from COVID-19 to right now, I think it's a huge success for Econ with Dr. Brand. So what have you learned throughout the process, and what do you think you could improve in next
Yeah.
coming years?
So one thing that I learned, and we've talked about this, is every time I'm like, what's the purpose of this? I give up. I'm not going to do this anymore. It's too much work. I don't see the returns to it. I don't even know what the returns to it. Then we get an email from somebody saying how important this content or this community is to them. Um, so, you know, what I learned is sometimes you don't see the outcomes of your work, but there's somebody in the background that you are inspiring. You're changing their lives in a way that you could never imagine. It's also been great for my research and my thought leadership. I've been invited to marketplace radio several times. I'm doing a lot of more news. And as a professor, and especially at a public institution, I want to make sure that I give back to my community and provide my expertise to help people learn more about economics and business. So the impact is there. Um, but the one thing, first thing I learned is, there's a lot of hidden work that people don't see, and don't give up. Continue moving forward. The other thing is I learned that I'm a creative human being. I get a lot of energy from creating things. And yesterday I spent a couple of hours editing a 3 minute and 50-second audio clip and putting some background music, some sound effects. Some people won't even notice the sound effects, but to me, I know they're there, and it's creative expression. Some people paint, some people cook. For me, it's creating this content is kind of my outlet and a place for me to clear my mind. So I learned, I used to not think I was a creative person, and I've learned through this content that this is my creativity. Finally, mentorship. The Ecom with Dr. A content has allowed me to teach students what I have learned is my comparative advantage. For years, I thought that, well, I kind of want to, I'll say it how it is. I was told that I was a great teacher. I never knew why I was a great teacher. I thought I did everything that everybody else did, go to class, exchange ideas, and students listen, and the audience listens, and they learn something. And what I realized over time is I do have an ability to engage people in a classroom setting, at least. Uh, so now this content allows me to pass on that skill set to the next generation, the Fawazes, the Graces, and you both are TAs in my class, and see how much time and effort goes to having a 75 minutes of engagement. It's not, you don't just show up and teach. You're thinking about the entire experience. How are people feeling? When do you take breaks? When do you add an assignment? And that's what gives me a lot of energy now is seeing you all take what you've learned from me and implement it, whether that's at work or through your unscripted podcast. But that's what I want to see happen next. And Antoine, he fell off the call, but he is actually starting his newsletter. So I'm excited to see that the through working with me, you all now are finding your own voices in the creating content arena.
Yes. Thank you for all of your great knowledge that we've picked up. Wouldn't have
Your wisdom.
My pleasure. I've learned a lot from you all, and I'm excited for the next 12 weeks of content working with you, Grace, Fawaz. We've got another year and a half.
Yeah.
We're going to make the most out of it. But for everybody listening, we really appreciate you. Thank you for joining us on this conversation with me on Econ with Dr. A. Be on the lookout for a rebrand. I don't know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, or how it's going to happen. But if you have any input, please do chime in. We can't do this without you. Grace and Fawaz, what are your parting words for today?
Peace out.
That's funny. Fawaz, when we end our podcast, he's supposed to say it's a wrap, but he's been saying eat a wrap instead. Podcast. So mine is it's a wrap, not eat a wrap. Thank you guys for
It's a wrap.
listening.
Thank you all. See you on the next episode.
See ya.
See you.